Politicization of water, Israeli settler colonialism in Nuba and the occupied Palestinian territories. Agenda review. We will elaborate on the introduction, background of the study, research objectives, research question, problem statement, framework, methodology and ethics, preliminary thesis, and the proposed timeline. The scope of the study will be on Nuba village and nearby towns in Hebron Governorate and immersion into external Israeli control over water resources, comparison of Nuba case on locally dynamics with the global context of rural poverty and agricultural vulnerability due to water scarcity. Why is this research relevant? It's because water scarcity impacts livelihood, food security, and social stability. We will highlight the interplay on water politics, settler colonialism, and agricultural decline, which demonstrates resource control that reshapes socio-political fragmentation, especially erosion of collective resistance and land disposition in the Palestinian society. Israeli water control. Since 1967, the West Bank water integrated into Israel system, whereas the Israeli Water Authority controls the quantity, quality, and access to the natural resource. The other point is that water inequality. Palestinians consume 81 liters per day, which is below World Health Organization's 100 liter minimum, and that Palestinian citizen pays more and face more restrictions and harsh access with higher risk. Settler colonial strategy is that water scarcity used to fragment society, erodes identity, and pressure land sales and migration, which can be forced migration and forced urban migration. The impact on Nuba and Hebron towns is unequal flow, contamination, farming decline, economic hardship, and internal conflicts. The goal is occupation diverts focus from political resistance to daily survival needs, and the research gap, which the literature will highlight, is the need for studies on water self-reliance, rainwater harvesting wells to counter Israeli policies. The research objectives are to examine Israel's control and unequal distribution of water as a settler colonial tactic aimed at provoking internal disputes and weakening Palestinian political unity in the face of Palestinian expansion. Also, to investigate how settler colonialism as a theoretical structure that operates to displace indigenous Palestinians in Nuba and the West Bank. Additionally, is to explore how water deficiencies caused by restricted supply and frequent cuts directly affect low-income families and rural farmers, forcing them to abandon or sell their agricultural land, because those are the vulnerable population of any community. So they usually make instant decisions and sometimes may become rash to analyze how Israeli water control contributes to the erasure of Palestinian identity, distorts cultural awareness, and invisibly pressures rural communities to migrate, undermining intergenerational land ownership and collective memory. Look, now you have to remember that the land symbolizes all of your identity, cultural awareness, and collective memory of the Palestinians. So if they abandon or sell their land, now they don't have any meaning or meaningful kind of connection or attachment to the land. So this is also an invisible tactic and mission that the occupation intends to in order to cleanse your memory and eliminate the Palestinian presence. That will be functioned and that will pass through the erasure of your identity and your just need to the land and need to farm your land. And also to assess the relationship between water scarcity, food insecurity, and agricultural job loss, particularly during prolonged summer water cuts and in the context of the rising cost of alternative water sources. So you financially will struggle a lot and you lose your job. That's harsh pressure, and that's part of the stressors that will be politically analyzed. And also to analyze how Israeli water control contributes to the area of Palestinian identity. I mean, that point actually is big, and that comes through years and generations to bring the results. The main research will directly navigate how does the Israeli sector colonialism control and unequal distribution of water resources contribute to the socio-political fragmentation of Palestinian communities. While the other secondary question will be about how does socio-economic and political disunity driven by water deficiencies facilitate land seizure and displacement of indigenous Palestinian farmers and low-income households in Nuba and the broader West Bank. And the other is how does Israel's restriction of water supply force rural residents and smallholder farmers of Nuba and the West Bank to migrate, whether forced urban migration or out migration to the other neighboring countries. We'll just shed a light on water scarcity and unequal distribution as critical challenges in the occupied Palestinian territories, particularly in Nuba town in the Hebron governorate, and the inhabitants, especially in mountainous areas, often go without water for weeks, forcing low and middle income households to rely on expensive tankers. And taking into account that usually middle and lower income families and smallholder farmers inhabit these rural areas. So, rural areas are the main target of the research. The framework is just based on qualitative critical political ecology, which Tetrault defines as a social scientific multidisciplinary field. Settler colonial framework as a form of imperial domination where settlers establish a new political order through the displacement of indigenous populations. As Wolff argues, it's a logic of elimination operation in which indigenous communities are removed through erasure or force. That's exactly how the political ecology in the framework of political settler colonial framework functions to eliminate, as the author here asserts, the Palestinian identity and the presence. And also in settler colonial theory, which will be adopted as Varansini discusses, settler colonial projects are not historical events, but enduring structures shaping statehood, sovereignty, and social relations across generations. That's something we talk about the inequality in the domination and in the control for the resources and exploiting them by structural inequality among Palestinians and settlers. The research will have design and tools will be particularly on semi-structured interviews to be conducted with affected rural smallholder farmers, rural residents, and displaced families from Nuba, and the local water technicians and municipal council members. While these interviews will explore live experience of water deprivation, coping mechanisms, political disengagement, and forced migration. The research ethics All interviewees will be informed of the research purpose and the right to confidentiality, and sensitive data will be anonymized. The research will follow ethical guidelines suitable for research in occupied high risk areas, which are always exposed to the Israeli expansion, settlements, establishment, sometimes the deficiencies of the resources being remote and always scattered on the margins of any city and in any state. Preliminary thesis: the core claim will be about water scarcity in the West Bank as a settler colonial tool, not a natural or technical issue. So it's not as apparently people think. You have to think back, see that why water scarcity is frequent, cuts, unequal distribution, disputes, etc. So this is something is, as I have mentioned in the title, politicization rather than only technical that can be resolved overnight. You need just a technician if it was technical. Since also 1967, Israel controls all Palestinian water, limits pumping, offers no subsidies, and charges up to 6 times more than settlers pays on Palestinians. So Palestinians pay 6 times more than settlers. This is unequal and discrimination of a treatment and just unjust, unfair treatment between Israeli settlers and Palestinian inhabitants who own and belong to this land and this state. And also, only 20% of the West Bank water is accessible to Palestinians. So, the ownership, the management, and the cheap and access of the water is always up to the Israeli side. That's about how it is unequal domination. That's about how it is structural inequality where the power and politics, okay, plays the role. It plays the game and take over Palestinians and how, why, when to access their own resources, especially the natural one. Here also we see the impact on agriculture where smallholder farmers abandon land. Rural depopulation accelerates also settlement expansion. The cultural and political impact is the loss of farming erodes heritage, weakens political unity, and fragments communities. What is actually interpreted by this is that if you lose your farming job, this erodes heritage because you don't engage with the land or have any connection. So the land possesses all the spirits of the heritage, the memory, the events, even the traditional tools in it, and maybe the tombs of your grandparents, so will be eliminated and will disappear over time for the future generations. That's why this is something that causes you to be ethnically cleansed. So you will be, besides the social conflicts and disputes, fragmented, and then hence will be politically also disunited and fragmented. So Palestinians will focus on the smaller conflict and then they will likely dismiss the Palestinian issue and the mission of political unity that will be far from reach. That's why we say the bigger picture is that control of water equals to control of the land, identity, and survival, because water is the main source of and the artery of livelihood, financial stability, land ownership, engagement with the land, engagement and linkages that will be framed through what will be supplement that physical land with its fuel. The same important chapters will be five. One is the introduction. The second chapter will just elaborate the literature review, looking up different studies and research conducted on that topic and finding out the gaps. And chapter three will be about settler colonialism and water infrastructure, focusing on the control by design. Chapter four will be about displacement by design, water inequality, and forced migration. And finally, the chapter number five will be about fragmenting the nation, water control, and political disunity.